The radar screen flickered once, twice, then went black. In the underground bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Marcus Reeves stared at the dead display, his coffee growing cold in his grip. 17 years of monitoring North American airspace, and he'd never seen anything like it. The F-35 Lightning II had simply vanished from all tracking systems at 3:47 hours, somewhere over the Nevada desert. Not crashed, not landed, vanished. "Sir, we've got a problem." Staff Sergeant Williams approached with trembling hands, clutching a classified folder marked with red tape. The aircraft that disappeared, it was carrying code Bravo. Reeves felt his stomach drop. Code Bravo wasn't just classified. It was theoretical, experimental, the kind of technology that existed only in the deepest levels of the Pentagon's black budget programs. If someone had intercepted it, if hostile forces had captured even fragments of the system, the implications would reshape global power dynamics overnight. "Who was the pilot?" Reeves asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Captain Zara Thorne, call sign Whisper." Williams hesitated. She's the one they used to call Washout at the academy." The name hit Reeves like a physical blow. Whisper. He remembered her from the files, the pilot who'd been quietly transferred between squadrons, always competent but never quite fitting in. The one whose unconventional approaches had earned her both grudging respect and professional isolation. Now she was carrying the most sensitive payload in American military history, and she'd vanished into airspace that officially didn't exist. "Get me General Morrison," Reeves ordered, "and initiate Broken Arrow protocols. We need to find that jet before dawn." What they didn't know was that Captain Zara Thorne was still alive, her damaged F-35 hidden in a canyon that existed on no maps, her radio crackling with signals that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. She discovered something in the black airspace, something that made code Bravo seem like a child's toy. The voices she was hearing weren't from any earthly control tower, and the coordinates they were transmitting led to locations that her navigation systems insisted were impossible. Above her, the Nevada sky blazed with stars that seemed to pulse in patterns, and she realized with growing horror that her mission had just become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Zara Thorne had always been different. At the Air Force Academy, while other cadets competed for attention and accolades, she'd quietly mastered every system, every protocol, every emergency procedure with a precision that unnerved her instructors. Her call sign, Whisper, hadn't started as a compliment. It referred to her habit of speaking so softly during briefings that others had to strain to hear her suggestions. Those suggestions, however, had a disturbing tendency to be exactly right. She'd grown up in rural Montana, the daughter of a rancher who taught her that the sky was just another frontier to be understood, not conquered. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving her with a profound respect for the unforgiving nature of both earth and air. Flying wasn't about domination for Zara. It was about finding harmony with forces larger than herself. The other pilots called her Washout behind her back, not because she failed, but because she never seemed to care about the glory. She didn't seek the spotlight, didn't compete for the most prestigious assignments. Instead, she'd quietly become the pilot you called when everything else had failed, when the mission required someone who could think beyond the manual. Now, crouched beside her damaged F-35 in a canyon that shouldn't exist, Zara felt the weight of that reputation. The aircraft's stealth coating had been scraped away by something that had left marks too regular to be natural, too precise to be accidental. Her communications array was picking up transmissions in languages that her universal translator couldn't identify, and her GPS was showing coordinates that placed her simultaneously in Nevada, the South Pacific, and somewhere called Grid Reference Null. "Base, this is Whisper," she whispered into her radio, using the call sign that had once been mockery but now felt like camouflage. "I have a situation." Static answered her, then a voice that made her blood freeze. It was her own voice, coming from somewhere else, saying words she'd never spoken, Whisper, this is base. Return to coordinates that no longer exist. The package you're carrying belongs to us now. Zara's hands moved to the sealed compartment containing code Bravo, her training warring with an instinct that told her something fundamental had changed. The stars above were arranging themselves in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and she realized that her mission briefing had been missing crucial information. Code Bravo wasn't just experimental technology, it was a key, and she just carried it to the lock. The canyon walls around her began to hum with a frequency that made her teeth ache, and she knew that whatever happened next would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone who'd ever trusted her to bring them home. In the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, the emergency session had reached classified levels that required senators to surrender their phones and submit to electronic sweeps. General Morrison, a man whose decorated career had spanned 3 conflicts, looked older than his 62 years as he faced the assembled intelligence chiefs. The holographic display showed a map of the southwestern United States, with a pulsing red dot marking the last known position of Captain Thorne's aircraft. "Gentlemen, ladies," Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades in uniform, "we have a situation that transcends normal operational parameters. Code Bravo was never meant to be deployed. It was meant to be studied, contained, understood. The fact that it's now in the field represents a failure of our security protocols at the highest levels." CIA Director Collins leaned forward, her expression grim. "General, with respect, the committee was never fully briefed on Code Bravo's capabilities. If we're going to authorize a recovery operation, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Morrison's jaw tightened. Code Bravo is a quantum communication device, but not in the way you might think. It doesn't just transmit information, it transmits information across parallel probability streams. The theoretical applications for intelligence gathering are unprecedented. Theoretical, Collins pressed. The device has never been tested at full capacity. The scientists who developed it warned that activation in certain geographic areas could have unforeseen consequences. The Nevada test site was chosen specifically because it's isolated, but also because it sits on what they called thin space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. NSA Director Huang spoke first. "Are you telling us that Captain Thorne is carrying a device that could potentially breach dimensional barriers?" "I'm telling you that Captain Thorne is carrying a device whose full capabilities we don't understand, and she's carried it into airspace that we've kept classified for reasons that go far beyond national security." Morrison's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Area 51 isn't just a testing ground for conventional aircraft. It's a containment zone for phenomena that don't fit our understanding of physics." The holographic display flickered, showing new data streams that made no sense. Radar signatures that appeared and disappeared, atmospheric readings that violated known laws of thermodynamics, and electromagnetic patterns that suggested the presence of technology far beyond current human capability. "Sir," the technician monitoring the display called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Thorne's aircraft. But according to our tracking systems, it's coming from 17 different locations simultaneously." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with the expression of a man who just realized he was standing at the edge of an abyss. "Patch it through." Captain Zara Thorne's voice filled the bunker, clear and calm despite the impossible circumstances. "This is Whisper. I'm alive, but I'm not alone. The package has been activated, and I'm seeing things that require immediate reevaluation of our understanding of local space-time. Request immediate extraction, but be advised, we're not the only ones interested in Code Bravo." The transmission cut to static, then returned with a different voice, still Zara's but speaking words that chilled everyone in the room. "Extraction is no longer an option. Welcome to the real war." The radio crackled with interference that seemed almost alive, patterns of static that pulsed like a heartbeat. Zara pressed her back against the canyon wall, her tactical vest heavy with equipment that suddenly felt inadequate for the situation she'd stumbled into. The F-35 behind her was no longer just an aircraft. It was a tomb of twisted metal and exposed circuitry, its stealth capabilities compromised by whatever had raked those precise grooves across its surface. "Base, this is Whisper," she tried again, adjusting her radio frequency to military emergency channels. "I have eyes on unidentified aircraft. Multiple contacts, bearing 090, altitude unknown. They're not showing up on any of my instruments." She paused, watching the sky through her scope. The objects moved with impossible precision, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that suggested they were made of materials that didn't exist in any textbook. They weren't helicopters, no rotor wash, no engine noise. They weren't jets, no contrails, no heat signatures. They were something else entirely. "Whisper, this is Colonel Reeves, Cheyenne Mountain. What's your current status?" The relief in hearing a familiar voice was overwhelming. "Colonel, I'm alive but compromised. My aircraft is down in what appears to be a canyon system not marked on any of my charts. The code Bravo package is secure, but I'm seeing things that don't match any known aircraft specifications." "Understood, Captain. We're working on extraction. Can you describe what you're seeing?" Zara focused her scope on the nearest object. It was roughly triangular, about the size of a small building, with surfaces that seemed to shift between solid and translucent. "Sir, I'm looking at aircraft that appear to be using some form of adaptive camouflage. Their engines produce no visible exhaust, and they're maintaining formation at what my instruments calculate as impossible speeds for their apparent mass." "Captain, this is General Morrison. You're to secure the package and await extraction. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to interface with Code Bravo. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir, but General," Zara hesitated, watching one of the objects descend toward her position. "I think they're responding to the package. Every time I move closer to Code Bravo, they alter their flight patterns. It's like they're tracking it." "Maintain your position, Captain. Help is en route." But even as she acknowledged the order, Zara knew that help might not arrive in time. The objects were circling now, their movements creating patterns in the air that hurt to follow with her eyes. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear what sounded like voices, human voices, speaking in languages that seemed familiar but just beyond comprehension. She checked her sidearm, knowing it would be useless against aircraft, but finding comfort in its weight. Whatever was happening in this canyon, whatever Code Bravo really was, she was the only thing standing between it and forces that clearly had capabilities far beyond anything in the American military arsenal. The silence stretched between radio calls, broken only by the distant sound of something that might have been music, if music could be made of mathematical equations, and the whisper of wind through impossible geometries. Zara Thorne had spent her entire career preparing for combat, but nothing had prepared her for a war that seemed to be fighting itself around her, with her as the unwitting catalyst. The extraction team was assembled in 43 minutes, a record time for an operation of this classification level. Lieutenant Colonel James Hawk Davidson led the group, his CV reading like a greatest hits of special operations: Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and a dozen missions that existed only in heavily redacted files. The team included Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a communications specialist who could make contact with a submarine from orbit; Technical Sergeant Alex Chen, whose expertise in electronic warfare had earned him a legend status among field operatives; and Corporal Danny Bishop Washington, a medic who'd kept more soldiers alive in impossible circumstances than anyone had a right to expect. "Listen up," Davidson addressed his team in the briefing room beneath Nellis Air Force Base. "We're going in for a pilot recovery, but this isn't standard SAR. The target is carrying classified materials that are apparently of interest to parties unknown. We don't know who, we don't know what their capabilities are, and we don't know what we're flying into." Santos looked up from her equipment check. "Sir, the communications intercepts from the target's location are unusual. We're picking up transmissions that appear to be coming from her radio, but she's not sending them. It's like someone's duplicating her signal." "Jamming?" Chen asked. "Negative. The signals are clean, military protocol, correct authentication codes. But they're saying things that don't match her actual transmissions. It's like we're hearing conversations from parallel timelines." Davidson felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd volunteered for this mission not because he understood it, but because Captain Thorne had requested him specifically. They'd served together briefly in Afghanistan, and he'd seen her handle situations that would have broken lesser pilots. If she was asking for help, she needed it. "Equipment check," he ordered. "Standard loadout plus anything Chen thinks might be useful against electronic warfare. We're going in dark, no GPS, no satellite support, just maps and compasses like our grandfathers used." The flight to the coordinates took them over terrain that looked increasingly unfamiliar despite detailed briefings. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, but there were formations that didn't appear on any geological survey, mesas that cast shadows in the wrong directions, and valleys that seemed to extend deeper than the surrounding topography should allow. "Colonel," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, "we're approaching the target coordinates, but I'm not seeing any canyon system. The terrain doesn't match our maps." Davidson moved to the cockpit window and felt his certainty evaporate. Below them was flat desert, unmarked by any geological features that could conceal a downed aircraft. "Take us down to search altitude. She's down there somewhere." But as they descended, the landscape began to shift. What had appeared to be solid ground revealed itself as a complex system of interconnected canyons, their walls carved with patterns that looked almost like writing. The search area that should have been a few square miles extended in all directions, a maze of stone and shadow that seemed to exist in spaces that geography insisted weren't there. "Base, this is Hawk," Davidson reported. "We have visual on the target area, but the terrain is inconsistent with our briefings. Beginning search pattern now." From somewhere in the labyrinth below, Captain Zara Thorne's voice reached them. "Hawk, this is Whisper. Welcome to the real Nevada. Hope you brought more than standard equipment." The canyon system revealed itself like a flower blooming in reverse, each turn exposing new passages that led deeper into stone formations that defied conventional geology. Davidson's team rappelled from their helicopter into a landscape that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Walls that appeared solid from one angle became transparent from another, creating a maze where traditional navigation was impossible. "Whisper, this is Hawk. We have boots on the ground. What's your position?" "Follow the blue lights," came Zara's voice, though no one could see any lights at all. "And Hawk, watch your six. They're learning our tactics." Staff Sergeant Santos deployed her communications array, trying to establish a clear signal with both the downed pilot and their base. "Colonel, I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference. It's like the rocks themselves are broadcasting on multiple frequencies." Technical Sergeant Chen had his electronic warfare equipment unpacked and was scanning the area with instruments that registered readings he'd never seen before. "Sir, whatever's causing the interference, it's not random. There's a pattern, like a signal being transmitted through the canyon walls themselves." The team moved deeper into the formation, following GPS coordinates that led them through passages that shouldn't exist. The walls bore markings that looked like a combination of hieroglyphics and circuit diagrams, carved with a precision that suggested advanced tools rather than natural weathering. "Movement," Washington called out, his weapon trained on shadows that seemed to shift independent of any light source. "Multiple contacts, but they're not showing up on thermal." Davidson felt the familiar tingle of combat awareness, the heightened state where everything became sharp and clear. "Formation Delta. Chen, can you get a reading on whatever's jamming our equipment? Working on it, sir. The interference is concentrated around what appears to be a central chamber about half a click ahead. Whatever's down there is generating enough electromagnetic energy to power a small city. They found Captain Thorne's aircraft in a clearing that definitely hadn't been there when they'd studied the satellite imagery. The F-35 was intact but altered, its stealth coating scraped away in patterns that formed geometric designs across its surface. Zara herself was positioned behind a natural rock formation, her rifle trained on something in the distance that none of them could see. "About time," she said without turning around. "We've got company and they're not from around here." Davidson studied the sky through his scope and felt his training collide with reality. The objects Zara had described were there, but they seemed to exist in a state of constant flux, their shapes shifting between familiar aircraft configurations and geometries that hurt to look at directly. "Captain, what's the situation with Code Bravo?" For the first time, Zara turned to face him, and Davidson saw something in her eyes that he'd never seen before, not fear, but a kind of profound understanding that seemed to age her in real time. "Colonel, Code Bravo isn't what we were told. It's not a communication device. It's a key, and we just opened a door that's been locked for reasons our ancestors forgot." Above them, the sky began to change, stars rearranging themselves in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose, and something that might have been welcoming if it weren't so utterly alien. The reunion was brief, interrupted by a sound that none of them could identify, a harmonic resonance that seemed to come from the canyon walls themselves, as if the stone were singing. Davidson's team took defensive positions while Zara led them toward the sealed compartment containing Code Bravo, her movements careful and deliberate. "Before we go any further," she said, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there before, "you need to understand what we're dealing with. Code Bravo isn't human technology. It's something we found, something we've been trying to reverse engineer for decades." Chen looked up from his instruments, his face pale. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match any known power source. Whatever's in that compartment is generating fields that exist in dimensions my equipment can't measure." "The objects in the sky," Davidson asked, "what are they?" "I think they're the original owners," Zara replied, "and I think they've been waiting for us to figure out how to use their technology." The sealed compartment was approximately the size of a briefcase, but its surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. As Zara approached it, the symbols began to pulse with a soft light that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Every time I get close to it," she explained, "the activity increases. The objects in the sky move in response, the electromagnetic interference intensifies, and I start hearing voices. Not human voices, something else, something that's trying to communicate but doesn't understand our language." Santos was monitoring communication frequencies, her equipment picking up transmissions that defied analysis. "Sir, I'm receiving signals that appear to be coming from the device itself. But they're not just radio waves, they're transmitting in spectrums that shouldn't exist." "What kind of signals?" Davidson asked. "Mathematical equations, star charts, and what appears to be historical records. But the history doesn't match anything in our databases. It's like receiving textbooks from a civilization that developed parallel to ours but made completely different choices." Washington had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "Colonel, we need to make a decision. Whatever this thing is, we can't leave it here, but I don't think we should take it back to base either. Those objects up there, they're not hostile, but they're not going to let us just walk away with their technology." Zara nodded. "Danny's right. They're not trying to hurt us, they're trying to communicate. But every time I try to interface with Code Bravo, the connection gets stronger. I think they want us to understand something, but our brains aren't equipped to handle the full transmission." Davidson studied the device, its alien symbols now pulsing in complex patterns that suggested language, mathematics, and something that might have been music. Captain, you've been exposed to this longer than anyone. What do you think they're trying to tell us? Zara's expression was thoughtful, almost peaceful. I think they're trying to warn us about something. Something that's coming, something that we need to be prepared for. Code Bravo isn't just a communication device. It's a gift, a tool to help us understand that we're not alone in the universe, and that being alone was never the real danger. Above them, the alien objects began to descend, their movements no longer random but purposeful, as if they were preparing for something that had been planned for a very long time. The descent of the objects created a pressure change that made their ears pop, but it was more than physical. It was psychological, as if the very air was becoming dense with meaning. Davidson's team maintained their positions, but their weapons felt increasingly inadequate as the objects revealed themselves to be not just aircraft, but something closer to living architecture. Structures that existed in spaces that human geometry couldn't accurately describe. "They're beautiful," Santos whispered, her communications equipment now receiving signals so complex that the displays couldn't process them. "Whatever they are, they're not military. This feels like art." Zara approached the Code Bravo device, her movements deliberate and calm. "I think they want me to activate it fully, not just carry it but actually use it." She looked at Davidson, seeking permission she knew he couldn't give. "Colonel, I don't think we have a choice. This isn't about national security anymore. This is about species survival." "Captain, you're talking about interfacing with alien technology. We don't know what the consequences might be." "I know," Zara replied, "but I also know that they've been waiting for us to be ready. Code Bravo wasn't found by accident. It was left for us to find, when we were technologically advanced enough to understand its purpose, but not so advanced that we'd misuse it." Chen's equipment was registering readings that broke his instruments. "Sir, the electromagnetic fields are intensifying. Whatever's about to happen, it's going to happen whether we're ready or not." The objects had settled into a circular formation around the canyon, their surfaces now clearly visible as something that combined metal, energy, and materials that seemed to exist in a state of controlled flux. They weren't threatening. They were waiting, with a patience that suggested they had all the time in the universe. "Base, this is Hawk," Davidson transmitted. "We have contact with the target and are assessing the situation. Be advised, we are not alone down here." "Hawk, this is Control. You are ordered to secure the package and extract immediately. Use any means necessary." Davidson looked at his team, then at Zara, who was now standing directly beside the Code Bravo device. "Control, I need you to understand. The package isn't just cargo. It's a communication system, and there are parties here who have prior claim to it." "Hawk, you are ordered to." The transmission was cut off as Zara placed her hand on the device. The symbols on its surface exploded into light, and suddenly everyone in the canyon could hear what she'd been hearing. Voices that spoke in mathematics, in colors, in concepts that bypassed language entirely and transmitted meaning directly into their consciousness. "Welcome," the voices said without words. "We have been waiting for you to be ready to hear us. The galaxy is vast, and you are not the first species to discover that isolation is an illusion. Code Bravo is your invitation to join a community that spans stars, but first you must understand that with knowledge comes responsibility." The objects in the sky began to pulse in harmony, their light creating patterns that told stories of civilizations that had faced the same choice Earth was now facing: to remain alone and eventually fade, or to accept guidance and become part of something larger than any single world could imagine. Davidson felt his entire understanding of reality restructuring itself around this new information. "Captain, what are they showing us?" "The future," Zara replied, her voice filled with wonder and something that might have been recognition. "They're showing us what we could become." The transmission through code Bravo wasn't just communication. It was education, a download of concepts and technologies that arrived not as data, but as intuitive understanding. Each member of the team found themselves suddenly comprehending aspects of physics, biology, and social organization that human science hadn't yet discovered. Santos understood, without knowing how she understood, that the electromagnetic interference wasn't random, but was actually a language more sophisticated than any human communication system. "They're not just talking to us," she said in amazement. "They're talking to everything: the rocks, the air, the electromagnetic fields themselves. The entire canyon is a communication array." Chen discovered that his electronic warfare equipment was actually primitive compared to what was possible when technology was designed to work with natural forces rather than against them. "Sir, they're showing me how to build devices that don't consume energy. They channel it, direct it, but never deplete it. It's like they've figured out how to make technology that's alive." Washington found himself understanding medical principles that could heal injuries by encouraging the body's natural systems to exceed their normal limitations. "Colonel, they're showing me how to treat conditions that we don't even know how to diagnose yet. It's like they understand how consciousness and biology interact." Davidson felt strategic and tactical knowledge flooding his mind, not just military tactics, but the deeper strategy of how civilizations survive and grow. "They're not just advanced," he realized. "They're wise. They've been through what we're going through, and they want to help us avoid the mistakes they made." But the most profound change was in Zara herself. As the primary interface with Code Bravo, she was receiving the full transmission, and her consciousness was expanding to encompass concepts that human language couldn't contain. She understood now why she'd been chosen for this mission, why her quiet competence and refusal to seek glory had made her the ideal candidate. "The call sign," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Whisper. They chose me because I know how to listen. The universe is full of voices, but most people are too busy talking to hear them." She turned to face the team, and they could see that something fundamental had changed in her. She was still Captain Zara Thorne, but she was also something more, a bridge between human and alien consciousness, someone who could translate between species that had evolved in completely different environments. "We have to go back," she said. "We have to tell them what we've learned. But first, we have to decide what kind of species we want to be. They're offering us membership in a galactic community, but only if we can prove we're ready for the responsibility." Above them, the alien objects began to rise, their mission complete. They had delivered their message, planted the seed of possibility, and now it was up to humanity to decide what to do with the gift they'd been given. The ascent back to the surface felt like emerging from a dream that had lasted centuries. Davidson's team moved through the canyon system, but the passages that had seemed like a maze before now revealed themselves as purposeful architecture, designed to gradually prepare visitors for increasingly complex revelations. Each turn had been carefully calculated to allow human consciousness to adapt to concepts that would have been overwhelming if presented all at once. "Colonel," Santos said, her communications equipment now functioning with clarity that exceeded its design specifications, "I'm receiving confirmation signals from our base, but I'm also picking up transmissions from locations that don't exist on any maps. It's like Code Bravo has opened communication channels to places we didn't know were there." Chen was studying his instruments with the fascination of someone who just discovered that everything he thought he knew was merely the first chapter of a much longer story. "Sir, the electromagnetic signatures we're detecting aren't just from the objects we saw. There are similar patterns coming from installations all over the planet. I think we just learned that we've never been alone." The helicopter extraction point was exactly where they'd left it, but the landscape around it had changed in subtle ways that suggested their perception had been altered rather than the geography itself. The pilot, unaware of what had transpired in the canyon, greeted them with routine professionalism that felt almost surreal after their encounter with technology that transcended human understanding. "Package secured?" he asked. Davidson looked at Zara, who still carried code Bravo but was now something more than just its guardian. "Affirmative, but we need to get to briefing immediately. Priority Alpha." During the flight back to base, Zara stared out the window at the Nevada desert, seeing it now with enhanced perception that revealed the true complexity of the landscape. Hidden structures, camouflaged installations, and geometric patterns that extended for miles in all directions, evidence of a presence that had been active on Earth far longer than human civilization had existed. "They've been here before," she said quietly, "not just watching, participating, guiding. Every major leap in human development, every breakthrough that seemed to come from nowhere, every moment when our species made impossible progress in impossibly short time periods." Washington was checking his medical equipment, finding that his understanding of human physiology had expanded to encompass healing techniques that worked by addressing the electromagnetic foundations of biological systems. "Captain, are you saying they've been influencing human development?" "Not influencing," Zara corrected. "Teaching, but only when we were ready to learn. The Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Space Age, each time, they provided just enough guidance to help us take the next step, but never so much that we became dependent." Santos looked up from her equipment. "So what happens now? Do we tell the world that we've made contact with alien intelligence?" "We tell the truth," Davidson said firmly. "But we tell it in a way that helps people understand that this is an opportunity, not a threat. They're not here to conquer us. They're here to invite us to join something larger than ourselves." As they approached base, Zara felt the weight of code Bravo in her hands, but also the weight of knowledge that would change everything. She'd been chosen not because she was the best pilot, but because she was the best listener. Now she had to help her species learn to listen to voices that had been trying to communicate with them for millennia. "Whisper," she said softly, understanding her call sign for the first time. "In the silence between words, that's where wisdom lives." The debriefing session was unlike anything in military history. General Morrison sat across from Davidson's team in a conference room that had been swept for electronic surveillance 6 times, its walls lined with materials designed to prevent any form of remote monitoring. The implications of what they were about to discuss went far beyond military classification. This was information that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. "Report," Morrison said simply, though his expression suggested he'd already guessed that the standard format would be inadequate for what they'd experienced. Davidson began with the tactical details: the insertion, the search, the contact with Captain Thorne. But as he progressed to their encounter with the alien objects, he found himself struggling to translate concepts that had been transmitted directly into their consciousness back into words that could be understood by someone who hadn't experienced the contact. "Sir, the objects we encountered weren't just aircraft. They were ambassadors, representatives of a community that spans multiple star systems, species that have learned to cooperate rather than compete." Morrison leaned forward. "You're talking about direct contact with extraterrestrial intelligence?" "Yes, sir, but not in the way we've been conditioned to expect. They're not invaders or conquerors. They're teachers, and they've been trying to help us develop the wisdom to handle advanced technology responsibly." Zara spoke for the first time since entering the room. "General, Code Bravo isn't experimental human technology. It's a communication device that was left for us to find, a gift from a civilization that went through the same developmental stages we're experiencing now." "Left for us by whom?" "By the same intelligence that's been guiding human development for millennia. Every major breakthrough in science, technology, and social organization, they've been there, providing just enough guidance to help us take the next step without creating dependency." Morrison studied the code Bravo device, its alien symbols now dormant but still radiating a sense of immense potential. Captain, you're asking me to believe that human civilization has been under alien guidance since the beginning. Not guidance, Zara corrected. Mentorship. They've been waiting for us to develop the wisdom to handle contact with other species. The current crisis isn't about national security, it's about species maturity. Santos pulled up her communications data, showing signal patterns that defied conventional analysis. Sir, the transmissions we received contained historical records, technological specifications, and what appears to be educational materials. But more importantly, they contained an invitation. An invitation to what? To join a galactic community, Chen answered. To participate in a network of civilizations that have learned to share knowledge, resources, and wisdom across interstellar distances, but only if we can prove that we're ready for the responsibility. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, the weight of command heavier than it had ever been. What kind of responsibility? The responsibility that comes with knowledge, Davidson replied. They're offering us technology that could solve every problem we face: energy, disease, resource scarcity, even aging. But only if we can demonstrate that we'll use it to benefit all of humanity, not just particular nations or groups. And if we refuse? Zara's expression was thoughtful. They won't force us. They'll wait the way they've been waiting for thousands of years, but they also won't intervene if we destroy ourselves. Free will is sacred to them, even the free will to make catastrophic mistakes. Morrison stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Nevada desert where humanity had just taken its first step toward becoming part of something larger than itself. Captain Thorne, in your assessment, what do they want from us? They want us to grow up, Zara said simply. To evolve from a species that competes for resources to a species that collaborates to create abundance. They want us to understand that the universe is vast enough for everyone to thrive, but only if we're wise enough to work together. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity stood at a crossroads, and the choice they made would determine not just their future, but their worthiness to join a community that had been waiting patiently for them to be ready. The subsequent briefings expanded outward like ripples in a pond, each level of command requiring deeper classification and more careful consideration of the implications. Within 12 hours, the information had reached the highest levels of government, and within 24 hours, similar briefings were being conducted in Moscow, Beijing, London, and every other capital, where leaders were beginning to understand that the balance of global power had just shifted in ways that made traditional geopolitics obsolete. President Harrison sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by advisors whose expertise suddenly seemed inadequate for the decisions they faced. The briefing materials spread across his desk included technical specifications that human science was centuries away from understanding, historical records that suggested every major advancement in human civilization had been subtly guided, and an invitation to join a galactic community that made Earth's problems seem parochial by comparison. Dr. Chen, the president addressed his science advisor, in your professional opinion, is this information credible? Sir, the evidence is overwhelming. The technology we've examined operates on principles that are consistent with our most advanced theoretical physics, but implemented in ways that suggest understanding we haven't achieved. The mathematical proofs alone would revolutionize our understanding of space-time relationships. Secretary of Defense Martinez leaned forward. Mr. President, we need to consider the strategic implications. If this technology falls into the wrong hands, or if other nations gain access to it before we do, the consequences could be catastrophic. With respect, Madam Secretary, interrupted Dr. Chen, that's exactly the kind of thinking that might disqualify us from receiving this technology. According to Captain Thorne's report, The alien intelligence specifically mentioned that the gift comes with the responsibility to benefit all of humanity, not just particular nations. The president studied the photographs of the alien objects, their graceful forms suggesting technology that had evolved beyond the brutal efficiency of human engineering towards something that resembled art. What do we know about their capabilities? Sir, according to the team's observations, they demonstrated control over electromagnetic fields, gravity, and what appeared to be localized spacetime distortions. But more importantly, they showed restraint. They had the capability to overwhelm our forces but chose instead to communicate. And Captain Thorne, what's her current status? She's been placed in protective custody, sir, but not because we consider her a threat. She's become something unprecedented, a human who's been directly interfaced with alien consciousness. She's not just a pilot anymore. She's potentially our most valuable asset for understanding how to proceed. The president was quiet for a long moment, understanding that his next decision would be remembered for as long as human civilization existed. I want to speak with her. Arrange a meeting, highest security, tomorrow morning. Sir, there's something else, Martinez said carefully. We've been monitoring global communications, and there are indications that similar contact events may have occurred in other locations. The Chinese military reported a missing aircraft over the Gobi Desert 3 days ago, and the Russians have been conducting classified operations in Siberia that match our operational parameters. Are you telling me that this contact is happening globally? It appears so, sir. Whatever intelligence is behind this, they're not just reaching out to America. They're reaching out to humanity as a whole. The president stood and walked to the window, looking out at the White House grounds where tourists gathered, unaware that their species had just received an invitation to join a galactic community. Dr. Chen, what do you think they expect from us? Sir, based on the information we've received, I believe they expect us to demonstrate that we've evolved beyond the need for competition and conflict. They're offering us the keys to abundance, but only if we can prove we won't use them to create new forms of scarcity. And if we fail that test, then we remain alone, sir. Not because they'll abandon us, but because we'll have chosen isolation over cooperation. The universe is apparently full of species that made that choice, and they serve as cautionary tales for those who come after. The president turned back to his advisors, his expression reflecting the weight of a decision that would shape the future of human civilization. Gentlemen, lady, we're about to make history. The question is what kind of history we want to make. Captain Zara Thorne stood in the secure facility's observation room, watching the sun set over the Nevada desert where her life had changed forever. The facility was underground, its walls lined with materials designed to prevent any form of electronic surveillance, but she could still sense the presence of the alien intelligence that had touched her consciousness. It wasn't intrusive, it was simply there, like a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering support and patience. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the facility's chief psychologist, approached carefully. "Captain, how are you feeling?" "Different," Zara replied honestly. "It's like I've been given access to a larger library, but I'm still learning how to navigate it. The information they shared isn't just data, it's understanding. I know things now that I couldn't have learned through any conventional education." "Can you describe what you learned?" Zara turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. "They showed me the history of galactic civilization, not just their history, but the history of dozens of species that have faced the same choice we're facing now. Some chose cooperation and grew beyond their wildest dreams. Others chose isolation and gradually faded into irrelevance. And what choice do you think we should make?" "I think we should choose to grow up," Zara said with quiet conviction. "We've been acting like children who have discovered fire, using it to hurt each other instead of to light the way forward. They're offering us the chance to learn from species that figured out how to use advanced technology responsibly." Dr. Mitchell made notes on a tablet, but her expression suggested she was grappling with concepts that traditional psychology couldn't adequately address. Captain, there are some people who would argue that accepting alien guidance represents a loss of human independence. And there are others who would argue that refusing it represents a loss of human potential, Zara countered. Independence isn't about isolation, it's about making informed choices. They're not trying to control us, they're trying to educate us. What do you think happens if we refuse their offer? Zara looked back toward the window, her enhanced perception showing her the hidden structures and energy patterns that most people couldn't see. They'll wait. They've been waiting for thousands of years already. But they won't intervene if we destroy ourselves. Free will is sacred to them, even the free will to make catastrophic mistakes. And if we accept, then we join a community that spans the galaxy. We gain access to technology that could solve every problem we face, but more importantly, we gain access to wisdom that could prevent us from creating new problems. They're not just offering us tools, they're offering us the knowledge to use those tools responsibly. Dr. Mitchell looked up from her tablet. Captain, you've been exposed to alien consciousness in ways that no human has ever experienced. In your opinion, what do they really want from us? Zara was quiet for a long moment, accessing understanding that had been transmitted directly into her consciousness. They want us to survive, not just as a species, but as a civilization worth preserving. They've seen too many promising species destroy themselves when they gained access to advanced technology without the wisdom to use it properly. So this is a test. It's an opportunity, Zara corrected. The test is whether we're mature enough to recognize it as such. They're not judging us. They're offering us the chance to judge ourselves and choose what kind of species we want to become. A soft chime indicated that her meeting with the president had been scheduled. As she prepared to leave the observation room, Dr. Mitchell asked one final question. Captain, what will you tell him? Zara smiled for the first time since her encounter in the canyon. I'll tell him what they told me, that the universe is vast enough for everyone to thrive, but only if we're wise enough to work together. The choice is ours, but we don't have to make it alone. The Oval Office meeting was scheduled for 600 hours, a time chosen to minimize the chance of interruption. President Harrison arrived early, finding Captain Thorne already seated and reviewing documents that appeared to be written in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched them. Captain, the president said, taking his seat across from her, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I understand you've been through an extraordinary experience. Sir, extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it, Zara replied. I've been given access to information that changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Walk me through it from the beginning. Zara began with her mission briefing, but as she described her encounter with the alien intelligence, the president found himself struggling to process concepts that challenged every assumption he'd held about humanity's uniqueness. The idea that Earth had been under subtle guidance for millennia, that human progress had been gently shepherded by an intelligence that spanned star systems, forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about history, science, and human potential. You're telling me that every major breakthrough in human civilization has been influenced by alien intelligence. Not influenced, Zara corrected. Guided, but only when we were ready to take the next step. They've never forced progress. They've simply provided the tools and knowledge when we demonstrated the wisdom to use them responsibly. And now they're offering us membership in some kind of galactic community. Yes, sir, but only if we can prove that we've evolved beyond the need for competition and conflict. They're offering us technology that could solve every problem we face, but it comes with the responsibility to use it for the benefit of all humanity. The president leaned back in his chair, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Captain, in your assessment, what happens if we refuse? They wait, sir. They've been waiting for thousands of years already, but they won't intervene if we destroy ourselves. Free will is sacred to them, even the free will to make catastrophic mistakes. And if we accept, then we join a community that spans the galaxy. We gain access to technology that could transform our civilization, but more importantly, we gain access to wisdom that could prevent us from repeating the mistakes that other species have made. The president was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents covered in alien symbols. "Captain, what do you think I should do?" "Sir, I think you should consider that this isn't just about America. This is about humanity as a whole. The intelligence I encountered doesn't recognize national boundaries. They see us as a single species that needs to learn to cooperate if we're going to survive. That's a difficult concept for someone in my position to accept." "I understand, sir. But consider this. They have the technology to solve climate change, resource scarcity, disease, even aging. But they'll only share it if we can demonstrate that we'll use it to benefit everyone, not just particular nations or groups." The president stood and walked to the window, looking out at the White House grounds where protesters gathered, unaware that their species had just received an invitation to join a galactic community. "Captain, what do you think they expect from us?" "I think they expect us to choose who we want to be," Zara replied. "We can continue to compete for resources and power, or we can learn to collaborate to create abundance. They're not going to force us to choose. They're simply offering us the opportunity to make that choice with full knowledge of the consequences." "And what are those consequences?" "If we choose cooperation, we join a community that has solved the problems that we're still struggling with. If we choose competition, we remain alone and eventually face the same fate as every other species that made that choice." The president turned back to face her, his expression reflecting the weight of a decision that would shape the future of human civilization. "Captain, I want you to know that your service to your country and your species has been exemplary. Whatever happens next, history will remember that you were the bridge between humanity and something larger than ourselves." "Thank you, sir. But I hope history remembers that we were wise enough to choose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and growth over stagnation." The president nodded, understanding that his next decision would be remembered for as long as human civilization existed. "Captain, I want you to help me draft a message to the nation. It's time to tell people that we're not alone and that we have a choice to make about our future." The global response to President Harrison's address was unprecedented in human history. Within hours of his announcement that humanity had been contacted by extraterrestrial intelligence, every major capital was conducting emergency sessions to discuss the implications. The initial reactions ranged from skepticism to panic, but as corroborating evidence emerged from military installations around the world, the reality of the situation became undeniable. In Moscow, President Volkov convened an emergency session of the Security Council, where similar reports of contact were being discussed. The Russian military had encountered objects identical to those described by Captain Thorne, and their own version of Code Bravo had been activated in the Siberian wilderness, with results that matched the American experience. "Comrades," Volkov addressed his advisors, "we are faced with a situation that transcends national interests. Whatever intelligence has made contact with us appears to be reaching out to humanity as a whole, not to individual nations." In Beijing, Premier Li was reviewing reports that indicated Chinese military forces had encountered the same phenomenon in the Gobi Desert. The implications were staggering, not just the existence of alien intelligence, but the suggestion that human civilization had been guided by external forces for millennia. "The question before us," Li said to his assembled ministers, "is not whether we can compete with this technology, but whether we can cooperate with it. The intelligence appears to be offering us a choice between isolation and integration." In London, Prime Minister Davies was struggling with the same decision. The British encounter had occurred in the Scottish Highlands, where a Royal Air Force pilot had experienced contact identical to Captain Thorne's. The message was consistent across all locations. Humanity was being invited to join a galactic community, but only if they could demonstrate the wisdom to use advanced technology responsibly. This isn't about national security, Davies told her cabinet. This is about species survival. The intelligence is offering us the tools to solve every problem we face, but only if we can prove that we'll use them for the benefit of all humanity. The United Nations General Assembly convened in emergency session, with representatives from every nation struggling to comprehend the implications of simultaneous contact events around the globe. Secretary General Akafor addressed the assembly with words that would be remembered for generations. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroads in human history. We have been offered membership in a galactic community, but the price of admission is the demonstration of wisdom, the wisdom to choose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and growth over stagnation. The debates that followed were intense, with some nations arguing for immediate acceptance of the alien offer and others demanding more time to study the implications. But as reports continued to arrive from contact sites around the world, a pattern emerged that suggested the intelligence was not interested in negotiating with individual governments, but with humanity as a whole. Captain Thorne found herself at the center of a global consultation process, her unique experience with alien consciousness making her invaluable as a translator between species. She briefed leaders from every major nation, her quiet competence and profound understanding gradually shifting the tone of the discussions from fear to possibility. The intelligence doesn't recognize our political boundaries, she explained to the assembled delegates. They see us as a single species that needs to learn to cooperate if we're going to survive. They're not asking us to abandon our individual cultures or identities. They're asking us to transcend the limitations that prevent us from working together. The breakthrough came when Premier Lee made an unexpected announcement during a joint video conference with leaders from around the world. Comrades, I believe we are approaching this question from the wrong perspective. We are asking what we might lose by accepting this offer, when we should be asking what we might gain. President Harrison nodded in agreement. Premier Lee is correct. This isn't about national advantage, it's about human potential. We're being offered the chance to solve problems that have plagued our species for millennia, but only if we can prove that we're wise enough to use the solutions responsibly. The consensus that emerged over the following days was unprecedented in human history, a global agreement that transcended traditional geopolitical boundaries. Humanity would accept the alien invitation, but with the understanding that the technology and wisdom they received would be shared equally among all nations and peoples. The formal response was delivered by Captain Thorne, speaking not as an American military officer, but as a representative of the human species. Standing in the Nevada desert where her encounter had begun, she activated Code Bravo and transmitted humanity's answer to the intelligence that had been waiting patiently for their reply. "We accept your invitation," she said, her words carrying the weight of every human who had ever looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. "We choose cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and growth over stagnation. We are ready to join the galactic community and accept the responsibilities that come with membership." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The sky filled with objects that revealed themselves to be not just aircraft but mobile cities, structures that combined technology and art in ways that suggested civilizations that had learned to create beauty as well as functionality. The voices that spoke through Code Bravo carried harmonics of welcome, of celebration, of recognition that another species had chosen wisdom over destruction. "Welcome," the voices said without words. "Welcome to the community of minds that spans the galaxy. Your journey begins now, but you do not travel alone. We have been waiting for you, and we are honored to call you family." The transformation began immediately, but it was subtle, respectful of human agency and dignity. The alien intelligence didn't impose their technology, they taught it, providing educational materials that arrived not as data, but as intuitive understanding. Scientists around the world found themselves comprehending principles that had been beyond human reach, but the knowledge came with an innate understanding of how to use it responsibly. Dr. Chen, working with an international team of researchers, discovered that the new energy systems didn't just provide power, they worked in harmony with natural forces, enhancing rather than depleting the environment. "It's like they've figured out how to make technology that's alive," he reported to the Global Research Consortium. "These systems don't consume resources, they channel them, direct them, but never deplete them." Medical researchers found themselves understanding healing principles that worked by addressing the electromagnetic foundations of biological systems. Dr. Washington, now leading an international medical team, reported breakthrough after breakthrough. "We're not just treating symptoms anymore. We're learning to encourage the body's natural systems to exceed their normal limitations. It's like we're discovering how consciousness and biology interact." The social implications were equally profound. The alien intelligence shared models of governance and social organization that had allowed other species to eliminate poverty, conflict, and environmental destruction. Political scientists around the world found themselves grappling with concepts that made traditional ideologies seem quaint by comparison. "They're not imposing their systems on us," reported Dr. Sarah Mitchell, now heading the international team studying the social aspects of the contact. "They're showing us how other species solve the problems we're still struggling with, but the solutions have to be adapted to human nature and human needs." Captain Thorne had become something unprecedented, a human who served as a permanent liaison with alien consciousness. Her role wasn't to command or control, but to facilitate understanding between species that had evolved in completely different environments. She found herself spending most of her time helping other humans adapt to concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about reality. "The hardest part," she explained to a gathering of world leaders, "is learning to think in terms of abundance rather than scarcity. We've been conditioned to compete for resources, but they're showing us how to create resources. The universe is vast enough for everyone to thrive, but only if we're wise enough to work together." The changes were visible everywhere. Energy systems that had seemed impossible became commonplace, providing clean power that enhanced rather than damaged the environment. Agricultural techniques that worked with natural systems rather than against them eliminated hunger and restored damaged ecosystems. Medical treatments that addressed the root causes of disease rather than just symptoms began to eliminate conditions that had plagued humanity for millennia. But perhaps the most significant change was in human consciousness itself. The knowledge that they were part of a galactic community, that they had allies and teachers among the stars, gradually shifted human perspective from isolation to integration. The petty conflicts that had dominated human history began to seem irrelevant in the face of opportunities that spanned star systems. "We're not just learning new technology," Captain Thorne observed in her final report to the Global Leadership Council. "We're learning new ways of being human. The intelligence that contacted us didn't just offer us tools, they offered us wisdom. The wisdom to understand that cooperation creates abundance, that diversity strengthens rather than weakens, and that the universe is vast enough for everyone to find their place." The ceremony took place 1 year after first contact, in the same Nevada desert where Captain Thorne had first encountered the alien intelligence. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered to witness humanity's formal induction into the galactic community. But the event was broadcast globally, so that every human being could participate in the moment. Their species took its place among the stars. The alien objects had evolved in that year, their forms becoming more beautiful and complex as they adapted to human aesthetic sensibilities. They weren't just functional anymore. They were art, technology that celebrated the beauty of consciousness expressing itself through matter and energy. Captain Thorne stood at the center of the ceremony, no longer just a military officer but something new, a bridge between worlds, a translator between species, a symbol of humanity's potential to grow beyond its limitations. Her call sign, Whisper, had taken on new meaning. She was the voice that spoke softly enough for the universe to hear. 1 year ago, she addressed the assembled crowd and the global audience, we discovered that we were not alone. But today, we celebrate something even more significant. We've discovered that we don't have to be alone. We've chosen to join a community that spans the galaxy, and in doing so, we've chosen to become the best version of ourselves. The formal induction was conducted not through words but through consciousness itself. Code Bravo, now permanently integrated with human technology, transmitted humanity's commitment to the principles that governed galactic civilization: cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, growth over stagnation. The response from the galactic community was overwhelming. Voices from dozens of species, speaking in harmonics that bypassed language and transmitted meaning directly into consciousness, welcomed humanity to the stars. They shared stories of their own journeys from isolation to integration, their own struggles to transcend the limitations that had once defined their species. But perhaps the most moving response came from a species that had made first contact with the galactic community only a few centuries earlier. Their message was simple: you are not the first to make this choice, and you will not be the last. But you are the first to make it with such grace, such wisdom, such determination to preserve what makes you uniquely human while embracing what makes you part of something larger. The ceremony concluded with a demonstration that captured the essence of what humanity had gained. A massive structure began to materialize in the desert, built not by human hands, but by technology that responded to human intention. It was a spaceport, a gateway to the stars, but it was also a monument to human potential, a structure that combined alien technology with human artistic vision to create something that neither species could have achieved alone. This is what we've gained, Captain Thorne said, watching the structure take shape. Not just technology, but the wisdom to use it responsibly. Not just power, but the understanding that power is meaningless without purpose. Not just access to the stars, but the knowledge that we are worthy of the journey. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in colors that seemed to echo the alien structures, Captain Thorne felt a profound sense of completion. Her journey from washout to whisper to something beyond human categories had been marked by quiet competence, patient listening, and the wisdom to understand that true strength came not from domination but from connection. The stars above no longer seemed distant and cold. They were home, and humanity was finally ready to claim its place among them. The memorial service for Captain Zara, Whisper, Thorne took place 50 years after first contact, in the same Nevada desert where she had first encountered the alien intelligence that would transform human civilization. She had lived to see humanity's integration into the galactic community, the elimination of poverty and conflict on Earth, and the establishment of human colonies among the stars. Her passing was mourned not just by humans, but by dozens of alien species who had come to respect her as the bridge between worlds, the translator who had helped entire civilizations understand each other. The service was attended by representatives from across the galaxy, their forms as diverse as the stars themselves, but united in their recognition of what she had accomplished. She taught us that wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers, said the speaker, a being of pure energy that had traveled from the galactic core to pay its respects. It's about knowing how to listen to the questions that matter. Colonel Davidson, now an old man whose career had been defined by that single mission to rescue a downed pilot, spoke for the human delegation. She was called washout by people who didn't understand that true strength comes from restraint, that real power comes from service, and that the greatest victories are won not through force but through understanding. The memorial itself was a structure that defied conventional architecture, built through the collaboration of human artisans and alien engineers. It rose from the desert floor like a crystalline flower, its surfaces reflecting not just light but the memories of all who had known her. Inside, holographic displays showed the history of human-alien contact, from that first frightening encounter to the celebration of galactic citizenship. But the centerpiece was a simple display case containing the original code Bravo device, its alien symbols now dormant but still radiating the sense of infinite possibility that had first drawn Zara to interface with it. Beside it was her flight helmet, bearing the call sign Whisper, in faded letters that had become one of the most recognizable symbols in human history. She chose the name Whisper, the memorial inscription read, because she understood that in the silence between words, that's where wisdom lives. She listened to the universe and heard not just alien intelligence, but the voice of possibility itself. The ceremony concluded with a demonstration that would have seemed impossible 50 years earlier. A human child, no more than 10 years old, walked to the memorial and placed her hand on the code Bravo device. The symbols began to glow, and suddenly the desert was filled with voices. Not just the alien intelligence that had first made contact, but the chorus of the galactic community welcoming new members, celebrating diversity, and promising that no species would ever have to face the universe alone. "This is her legacy," said the child, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't existed in human speech before contact. "Not just the technology we gained, but the wisdom to use it. Not just the knowledge that we're not alone, but the understanding that we never were." As the memorial service ended and the attendees began to disperse, returning to their homes among the stars, the desert fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the crystalline memorial. But those who listened carefully could still hear what Captain Thorne had heard in that canyon 50 years earlier. The voice of the universe itself, patient and eternal, speaking to any consciousness wise enough to listen. The stars above no longer seemed distant and cold. They were home, and humanity had finally learned to whisper back. In the decades that followed, humanity's integration into the galactic community became complete. The technologies shared by their alien allies had eliminated scarcity, disease, and aging, but more importantly, they had transformed human consciousness itself. The species that had once been defined by competition and conflict had learned to create abundance through cooperation, to find strength in diversity, and to understand that the universe was vast enough for everyone to thrive. The memorial to Captain Zara, Whisper, Thorne became a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy, a place where representatives of dozens of species came to pay their respects to the human who had helped their civilizations learn to understand each other. But it was also a place of learning, where young humans came to understand the history of their species' transformation from isolation to integration. She wasn't the best pilot, the tour guides would tell visitors, but she was the best listener. And sometimes that's what the universe needs most, not someone who can impose their will, but someone who can hear what others are trying to say. The children who visited the memorial would often ask why Captain Thorne had chosen to interface with Code Bravo when she could have simply waited for orders. The answer was always the same: because she understood that some decisions are too important to wait for permission. She chose to trust her instincts, and in doing so, she chose our future. The Nevada desert where it all began had been transformed into a preserve, a place where the natural beauty of Earth was maintained as a reminder of where humanity had come from. But it was also a gateway to the stars, with spaceports and research facilities that served as launch points for human missions to distant worlds. Captain Thorne's influence extended far beyond the memorial. Her approach to problem-solving, patient observation, careful listening, and the wisdom to know when to act had become the standard for human diplomats and explorers. The call sign Whisper had evolved into a title of respect, given to those who demonstrated the ability to bridge differences and find common ground. The story of that first contact, of a pilot who had been underestimated and overlooked becoming the bridge between worlds, was told and retold across the galaxy. It became a parable about the importance of listening, of patience, of understanding that true strength comes not from domination but from connection. And in the end, perhaps that was Captain Zara, Whisper, Thorne's greatest achievement. Not just that she had helped humanity join the galactic community, but that she had done so while remaining fundamentally human. She had gained access to alien consciousness without losing her own identity, had learned to speak the language of the stars while never forgetting the value of a whisper. The universe had been waiting for humanity to be ready to hear its voice. It had taken a pilot who had learned to listen in the silence between words to finally help her species understand that they were not alone, had never been alone, and would never be alone again. In the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.